Is there someone haunting your thoughts day and night? Someone you just can't erase from your mind, no matter how hard you try? Are you tortured by the mystery of why certain people burn themselves into your soul forever, while others vanish like smoke? If you're drowning in obsessive memories, paralyzed by a past you can't escape, listen closely. Your unconscious mind isn't torturing you. It's screaming a sacred message only Carl Jung fully decoded. A message holding the explosive key to your total emotional freedom. In the next few explosive minutes, you'll discover the shocking Jungian secret your unconscious is begging you to hear. You'll learn exactly what this relentless obsession is really demanding from your soul. And I'll reveal the precise, powerful steps to shatter these mental chains forever. No more suffering, no more longing. This is your path to reclaiming your mind and your peace, starting now. But before we dive into this life-altering revelation, if this channel ignites something deep within you, do this. Hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously. So many are watching without subscribing. Don't miss what's coming. Every week we deliver raw, transformative truths like this to help you conquer your deepest struggles. Tap subscribe and the notification bell. This is your lifeline to freedom. And right now, as this message reaches your soul, tell me in the comments below, where are you watching from? Which corner of the world is craving Jung's wisdom today? Let's see how far this liberation spreads. Now, let's expose what your unconscious is really trying to solve. When you can't forget someone, your unconscious is trying to process something that was left incomplete. Jung spoke of how our unconscious doesn't allow us to forget certain people because they represent unresolved aspects of our own psyche. It's not that this person is so special or irreplaceable, it's that they symbolize something within you that still needs to be integrated or healed. Most people think that not being able to forget someone means they love them deeply, or that they were the one, but the reality is far more complex and liberating. Jung understood that when someone remains obsessively in our thoughts, it's because that person activated something in our unconscious that demands attention. Think about this. There are people with whom you've had longer, more meaningful relationships, whom you've literally forgotten, while there's someone you may have had a brief encounter with whom you can't get out of your mind. Why does this happen? Because the length of the relationship or its objective importance doesn't determine its impact on your unconscious. Jung explained that our unconscious functions symbolically. When you meet someone you can't forget, that person becomes a symbol of something you need to understand about yourself. It could be that they represent a part of yourself you've rejected, an unhealed trauma, or a quality you need to develop. Have you noticed that the person you can't forget has certain characteristics that intensely attract or repel you? Those characteristics aren't random. They're exactly the aspects your unconscious needs you to examine. If you're attracted to someone very self-assured, perhaps your unconscious is asking you to develop more self-confidence. If you can't forget someone who rejected you, maybe you need to heal your fear of abandonment. Here's a revealing exercise. Think of that person you can't forget, and write down the 3 qualities that impacted you most about them, whether positive or negative. Now ask yourself, where are those same qualities in my life? What are they teaching me about what I need to heal or develop in myself? Jung spoke of the concept of projection, where we unconsciously attribute to others the qualities we deny or haven't developed in ourselves. The person you can't forget became the screen onto which you projected important aspects of your own psyche. Your unconscious refuses to forget them because you haven't reclaimed those projections yet. When you understand this, something powerful happens. You stop seeing that person as an external figure you need to reclaim or reject, and you start seeing them as a mirror of your own internal process. The love or obsession you feel isn't really for that person. It's for the aspects of yourself you see reflected in them. This is the first step to liberation, recognizing that your unconscious is using that person as a symbol to communicate something important about your own growth. You don't need that person in your life. You need to integrate what they represent within you. Have you noticed how some people you couldn't forget completely lost their power over you once you developed the qualities they represented? This isn't a coincidence. It's the natural functioning of your psyche. Once you integrate the lesson, you no longer need the symbol, and that's what we'll discuss next. The second truth you must understand is that when you can't forget someone, your unconscious is pointing to an emotional wound that needs healing. Jung understood that our unconscious is like a natural healing system, constantly trying to lead us toward wholeness. That person you can't get out of your mind is directly connected to a wound that hasn't fully healed. This wound could come from childhood, past relationships, or even generational family patterns. The reason your unconscious keeps that person in your mind is because they activated that wound so intensely that your psyche knows it's time to heal it definitively. Many women get frustrated because they think they should be able to get over someone through willpower alone. But Jung knew the unconscious is far more powerful than the conscious mind. When there's a deep wound needing attention, your unconscious will use any means necessary to get you to heal it, including keeping someone obsessively in your thoughts. Think about this. What specific wound did that person activate in you? Did they make you feel not good enough? Did they trigger your fear of abandonment? Did they make you doubt your worth? Did they awaken your need for control or your fear of intimacy? The intensity of your inability to forget them is directly proportional to the depth of the wound they touched. Jung spoke of how our unconscious uses relationships as opportunities for healing. When someone activates a deep wound in you, your unconscious sees this as a golden opportunity to finally heal that wound. That's why you can't forget that person, because they represent your most important healing opportunity. Have you noticed that the people who hurt you the most are also the ones who taught you the most about yourself? This isn't masochism. It's your unconscious wisdom at work. Those people were catalysts for your growth, however painful. The wound that person activated in you probably didn't start with them. They were simply the last straw for something that had been full for a long time. Your unconscious keeps them in your mind because it knows healing this wound will change your entire life, not just your relationship with that specific person. Here's a deep healing exercise. Identify the specific wound that person activated in you. Now ask yourself, when was the first time I felt this wound? How old was I? Who else made me feel this way? When you trace the origin of the wound, you'll understand why your unconscious is so determined to heal it. Jung understood that our deepest wounds often originate in childhood, when we were most vulnerable and least capable of processing painful experiences. These unhealed wounds become unconscious patterns that attract situations and people who reactivate them over and over until we finally heal them. The person you can't forget isn't your problem. They're your opportunity. Your unconscious keeps them present because it knows healing the wound they activated will free you not only from them, but from an entire pattern of suffering you've been unconsciously repeating. Have you wondered why you attract people over and over? It's because your unconscious is trying to heal the same wound through different people. Once you heal the root wound, you'll stop attracting people who activate it, and you'll be able to forget whoever currently occupies your mind. The healing process requires looking beyond that specific person and focusing on the wound they represent. When you heal that wound, they'll automatically lose their power over you because they'll no longer be necessary for your growth process. Jung knew true healing doesn't come from changing external circumstances, but from integrating and healing our unconscious contents. That person you can't forget is simply the messenger, not the message. The message lies in the wound, needing your loving attention, and that's what we'll discuss next. The third truth you need to understand is that when you can't forget someone, your unconscious is activating what Jung called the compensatory function. It's trying to balance something that's unbalanced in your life, and that person represents exactly what you need to integrate to achieve wholeness. Jung understood that our unconscious always seeks totality, the complete integration of all our aspects. When there are parts of ourselves we've denied, repressed, or failed to develop, the unconscious uses our relationships to show us exactly what we need to integrate. If you can't forget someone very independent and free, perhaps you need to develop more autonomy in your own life. If you're obsessed with someone very emotionally expressive, maybe you need to connect more with your own feelings. If you can't get someone very self-assured out of your mind, you probably need to cultivate more self-trust. The intensity of your fixation on that person is directly proportional to how urgently you need to develop those qualities in yourself. Your unconscious is literally screaming at you to pay attention to aspects of yourself you've neglected or denied. Jung spoke of how we often fall in love with or become obsessed with people who represent our golden shadow, positive aspects of ourselves we haven't developed or don't believe we deserve. That person you can't forget is reflecting your own unrealized potential. Have you noticed that the person you can't detach from has qualities you secretly admire but believe you don't possess? This isn't coincidence. Your unconscious is showing you exactly who you have the potential to become. Think about this. If you could fully develop in yourself all the qualities you admire in that person, would you still need them in your life? The answer is probably no, because you'd no longer need to seek externally what you already have internally. Jung understood that this integration process is one of the most important aspects of psychological growth. When you reclaim the projections you've placed on others and develop those qualities in yourself, you not only free yourself from obsession, you become a more complete version of yourself. The person you can't forget is like a mirror showing you aspects of yourself you need to reclaim. As long as you keep seeking those qualities externally, you'll remain tied to people who represent them. But when you develop them in yourself, you'll be free. Here's a transformative exercise. Make a list of all the qualities you admire in that person you can't forget. Now for each quality, ask yourself, how can I develop this quality in my own life? What specific steps can I take to cultivate this in myself? Jung knew the individuation process requires reclaiming all aspects of ourselves we've projected onto others. This doesn't mean becoming a copy of that person. It means developing those qualities in a way authentic to you. The moment you consciously start developing the qualities you admire in that person, something magical happens. They begin to lose their power over you. You no longer need them as an external source of those qualities because you're cultivating them within yourself. Have you noticed that when you develop a quality you admired in someone else, suddenly that person no longer seems so special? This is because your unconscious no longer needs to keep them in your mind as a reminder of what you need to develop. Your unconscious compensatory function is incredibly wise. It's using that person as a catalyst for your own growth. Once you integrate what they represent, you can thank them for the role they played in your development and finally let them go. Jung understood that the most intense, hardest to forget relationships are often those that teach us the most about ourselves. That person you can't get out of your mind isn't there to torture you. They're there to show you your own unrealized potential. And that's what we'll discuss next. The fourth truth you must understand is that when you can't forget someone, your unconscious is activating what Jung called the autonomous complex. This person has become an independent psychic complex within your mind that has a life of its own and continues influencing your thoughts and behaviors unconsciously. Jung discovered that when we have emotionally intense experiences with certain people, these experiences can form complexes in our unconscious. These complexes function like little independent personalities that can take control of our psyche at certain times. When you can't forget someone, that person has formed such a strong complex in your unconscious that it's literally developed autonomy. It's as if part of you is constantly in conversation with that person, reliving memories, imagining scenarios, or trying to resolve something left unfinished. Have you noticed that sometimes you feel like you're having constant internal conversations with that person, as if part of your mind is always processing something related to them, regardless of what you're consciously doing? That's the autonomous complex in action. Jung understood these complexes form when there's very intense emotional charge associated with a certain experience or person. The emotional energy is so strong it creates a kind of psychic magnet, constantly pulling your attention toward that person or experience. The problem is that as long as this complex remains active in your unconscious, it will keep influencing your life in ways you may not consciously recognize. It can affect your decisions, future relationships, self-esteem, and ability to be present in your current life. Have you noticed that since meeting that person you can't forget, certain patterns in your life have changed? Maybe you behave differently in relationships, or you've developed new fears or insecurities. That's the complex exerting its unconscious influence. Jung knew the only way to free yourself from an autonomous complex is to make it conscious. As long as it stays unconscious, it will keep having power over you. But when you bring it into the light of consciousness and understand its function, you can begin deactivating its influence. Here's an exercise to make the complex conscious. Imagine you could have one final conversation with that person you can't forget. What would you say? What do you think they'd say to you? What was left unresolved between you? Writing this imaginary conversation can help you identify exactly what's keeping the complex active. The autonomous complex feeds on unfinished business, things left unsaid, unresolved conflicts, unfulfilled hopes. As long as your psyche perceives something as incomplete regarding that person, the complex will remain active. Jung understood that often these complexes form not just because of what happened, but because of what didn't happen. If there was relationship potential that never materialized, or if you feel something could have been different, your unconscious may stay hooked on those unrealized possibilities. Have you wondered why sometimes the hardest people to forget are those with whom you had incomplete or ambiguous relationships? It's because your unconscious hates unresolved endings. It prefers keeping the complex active rather than accepting certain things simply aren't meant to be. The key to deactivating the autonomous complex is finding a way to achieve psychological closure, regardless of whether there's closure in external reality. You need to internally complete what was left incomplete externally. Jung knew this process requires conscious work. Trying to forget or distract yourself isn't enough. You need to enter into dialogue with the complex, understand what it needs, and find ways to meet those needs without requiring that person's physical presence. Sometimes the complex needs forgiveness. Sometimes it needs expression. Sometimes it needs grief. Sometimes it simply needs recognition. When you identify exactly what your autonomous complex needs, you can begin giving it what it needs consciously and intentionally. The goal isn't to eliminate the complex entirely, it's to integrate it so it no longer has unconscious control over your life. When you achieve this, that person can remain in your memory without causing suffering or interfering with your present. And that's what we'll discuss next. The fifth and most transformative truth is that when you can't forget someone, your unconscious is preparing you for what Jung called the Great Liberation. This entire process of mental obsession, emotional pain, and internal struggle isn't a punishment, it's an initiation. Your psyche is taking you through a process of psychological death and rebirth that will completely transform you. Jung understood that the most painful experiences in our lives often hold the greatest potential for transformation. That person you can't forget entered your life to activate a transformation process so profound it requires the complete destruction of your old way of being to make way for a new version of yourself. This is why the process of not being able to forget someone feels so intense and devastating, because you're literally dying psychologically. The person you were before meeting that person is being dismantled to make way for who you're destined to become. Jung spoke of how the deepest transformation processes always involve a phase of chaos and disintegration before reintegration. That feeling of being lost, confused, or like your life is upside down is a necessary part of the rebirth process. Have you noticed that since meeting that person you can't forget, many aspects of your life have changed dramatically? Perhaps you've questioned beliefs you once took for granted, seen patterns in yourself you didn't recognize before, or felt an urgency to change things in your life you used to tolerate. This isn't coincidence. That person was the catalyst your unconscious needed to initiate a transformation process that was already waiting to happen. Your soul was ready to evolve, and they were simply the trigger that activated the process. Jung understood our unconscious often uses the most intense relationships as vehicles for our spiritual and psychological growth. That person you can't forget isn't in your life by accident. They're there because your soul needed exactly the experience they provided. The pain you feel from not being able to forget them isn't just emotional pain. It's growth pain. It's like labor pains. Intense, but necessary to give birth to a new version of yourself. Your unconscious is literally birthing a new identity through this experience. Have you noticed that some of your most important revelations about yourself came through your experience with that person? Perhaps you discovered strengths you didn't know you had, or you faced fears you'd been avoiding. That person was the mirror you needed to see yourself completely. Jung knew that individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, requires facing exactly the aspects of ourselves we've most avoided. That person you can't forget forced you to face parts of yourself you might have kept avoiding indefinitely. Here's a final integration exercise. Write a thank you letter to that person you can't forget. You don't have to send it, but thank them for all the ways their presence in your life forced you to grow, change, and evolve. Acknowledge how they helped you become who you are now. This exercise can be challenging because it requires seeing your pain from a completely different perspective. But Jung understood that when we can genuinely thank our most difficult experiences, it's a sign we've fully integrated the lesson and are ready for liberation. The great liberation arrives when you finally understand that person you can't forget wasn't your destiny. They were your teacher. They weren't meant to stay in your life forever. They were meant to change you forever. Once you fully integrate this understanding, something magical happens. Their power over you dissolves. Jung knew that when we truly complete a life lesson, we no longer need external circumstances to keep teaching it to us. That person can remain in your memory as an important chapter in your story, but no longer as an obsession controlling your present. Can you imagine how it would feel to think of that person with gratitude instead of pain? With appreciation for their role in your growth instead of longing for their presence? That perspective shift is the sign you've completed the liberation process. The person you can't forget is teaching you the most important lesson of all, that your happiness, wholeness, and worth don't depend on any external person. They're there to show you that everything you need is already within you, waiting to be developed and expressed. Jung understood the most transformative relationships are often the briefest or most complicated because they don't let us settle into comfortable patterns. They force us to grow, change, and evolve in ways we wouldn't have chosen voluntarily. When you finally integrate everything that person came to teach you, when you've healed all the wounds they activated, developed all the qualities they represented, and completed all the transformation their presence initiated, then, and only then, will you truly be able to forget them. But by that time, you won't want to forget them in the sense of erasing them from your existence. You'll remember them as we remember the great teachers in our lives, with gratitude, respect, and the deep understanding that they changed our destiny for the better. If you've made it this far and recognize your own experience in these words, I want you to know something profound. You're not crazy. You're not obsessed. There's nothing wrong with you. You're in the middle of one of the most important transformation processes of your life. Your unconscious is working exactly as it should, leading you toward your fullest evolution. The person you can't forget came into your life with a sacred purpose, to help you become who you're destined to be. Once you complete this transformation process, you'll see that all the pain, confusion, and struggle was worth it, because it turned you into a wiser, stronger, more complete version of yourself. Your unconscious isn't asking you to forget that person to torture you. It's asking you to fully integrate everything they represent so you can finally be free. And when you reach that point of total liberation, you'll understand they were one of life's most important gifts to you, disguised as one of your greatest challenges. Jung knew our deepest wounds often become our greatest strengths. That person you can't forget is in the process of becoming the source of your greatest wisdom and personal power. The day you can see them from this perspective will be the day you're truly free. If this message has resonated with you, if you've found clarity in these words, I want you to write down this declaration that will mark the beginning of your liberation. I choose to see my pain as my transformation process. I thank this person for being my teacher, and I commit to fully integrating everything they came to teach me. This declaration isn't just for others. It's for your own unconscious. It's the signal that you're ready to complete the transformation and liberation process. Every time you write it, read it, or remember it, you'll be reaffirming your commitment to your own evolution. Because understanding why you can't forget someone isn't just intellectual understanding. It's the first step toward the deepest emotional freedom you can experience. It's the beginning of your transformation from victim of your circumstances to master of your own destiny. You are now living proof of what happens when a woman chooses radical self-liberation. Your journey, once shadowed by obsession, has been transformed into sacred fuel for your rebirth. You hold the Jungian keys to turn pain into power and confusion into crystal clarity. Remember, your healing isn't just your freedom. It's a beacon for every woman still wrestling with the ghosts of her past. If this truth ignited revolution within you, pay it forward now. Smash that like button. Algorithms are modern-day messengers. Your light carries this liberation to women drowning in silence. Scream your breakthrough in the comments. Type, "I reclaim my power," and tell me, which Jungian insight shattered your chains today? Your words become lifelines. Subscribe with ferocity. Thousands watch these truths anonymously. Don't gamble with your growth. Tap subscribe plus hit the bell. Your next breakthrough arrives in 72 hours. This is not an ending. It's your activation. Jung's most dangerous secrets await you next week. We expose how ancestral wounds secretly hijack your relationships and exactly how to sever them forever. You will not survive that revelation unchanged.